Welcome back. This is Brian Stillman with BeTerrific. We're at NAB 2019 here in New York City at the Jacob Javits Convention Center. I'm here with Ford and Julius from Activate Entertainment. They do Esports Production. You're out of Las Vegas. You're here at NAB. Tell me a little bit about Esports Production. What goes into it? What are you guys doing?
So for Esports Production, there's a lot of similarities between traditional sports, but there's a lot of differences as well. For example, for the Fortnite World Champions, that was a couple months ago, they had something like 300 inputs, whereas for something like a football event, you have, a fraction of that. So,
sure.
So it's a lot more technical. There's a lot more components going into it, a lot more moving parts.
You're taking all of that, and you're the ones who are broadcasting it out to the world, who are letting people tune in to watch these events.
Correct. We specialize on those live streams, that live production.
How do you handle hundreds of inputs? What kind of setup is that like? That sounds like weeks of work and 18 zillion miles of cable. What goes into something like that?
Well, it basically is exactly that. A whole lot of cabling and so for each input, or for each station, I should say, you have two inputs. You have the POV camera and the game itself.
Sure.
So for something like Fortnite with 100 players, that's 200 inputs alone just for each station.
Wow. I can't even imagine that. It sounds, we come in, we set up 3 cameras, we've got our 3 cables going out, and life is easy. So you've got a few partnerships. Esports is growing. You're telling me that you've got a few partnerships out in Las Vegas. What sort of things is Activate Entertainment doing to grow the production side of things?
So we have a partnership right now with Caesars Entertainment where they're building out a tech innovation studio called Blackfire. And out of Blackfire, we'll have a small studio which we'll be doing live production out of for the other companies that we have partnerships with, like Panasonic, Dell, Alienware, Intel, people like that, where we'll not only be showcasing what esports can do and what gear we're using to make it happen, but actually producing content out of there for these companies and for ourselves.
What sort of content? Is it like interview shows, things like that, or is it?
It'll be the whole shebang for esports, which includes things like interviews, the actual competitions themselves. We'll have weekly shows running out of there where people will be competing for money, big tournaments and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different angles for that studio.
Esports is such a fast-growing area of entertainment, area of competition. What sort of innovations are you guys seeing in terms of the way it's growing and the way it's coming together as organized events, as organized sport?
You want to hit this one, Julius?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I think that from my perspective, just because what my role is, especially with Activate, is I'm more of a host or commentator for esports, and
Sure.
so for me, I'm kind of the guy that helps make sure that the event is exactly what it's supposed to be on the front end, right? I help Activate pretty much put on the best show possible to really put out there for everyone, whether they're spectating live or spectating at home on a feed, because of, like what you just said, we really want to help grow the esports industry and kind of put it as many places as we can because of how much we're passionate about esports and how much we really love esports.
It is. What is fueling the growth? What is fueling the continued sort of forward momentum of esports? I remember when I was a kid, we used to have a show on TV where people actually played video games, like full consoles, like from an arcade, and they would compete against each other. And now, and that lasted probably less than a season. But now, obviously, esports is everywhere, and it's huge, and it's got $1 million prize purses and things like that. What's pushing that growth forward?
So largely what's pushing it forward is esports is a small slice of a much bigger industry, which is video gaming, right? Video gaming is huge. It's everywhere. So you have these big game developers like Activision, Blizzard, Epic, who see this as a marketing opportunity for their games. So people love watching them. They love consuming content for these games. So as long as the video game industry is growing, so will esports.
And to kind of piggyback off that too, as someone who is constantly commentating about games. I'm a player myself, and so he hit it right on the nail. And the fact that a lot of the reason why esports is such a booming industry right now is because a lot of the people that love to watch it are players themselves, and they really enjoy the entertainment value and how exciting these events can be. And that's why we work so hard at Activate to put on the best, most exciting event possible, just because we know how much the spectators really value that experience as players and people who love the games they're watching.
Yeah, you said something that I found kind of interesting. It is a marketing opportunity for the game companies themselves. That's sort of an interesting difference between esports and maybe traditional sports. Baseball, for instance, is the means and the end of the whole thing. It is not a marketing opportunity for companies that make baseballs, even though obviously it's a company that makes baseballs, they want to see their stuff being used on the field, or if they have mitts or whatever. But baseball itself is not some product being manufactured somewhere that's then being promoted by the playing of baseball and the watching of baseball. Video game competitions right now are. You have Blizzard, you have Activision, you have these companies making these games. Where is that balancing line? Where do we reach a point where these things take off in and of themselves and perhaps divorce themselves from being a marketing component of the companies that are supplying the games, that are sponsoring the games?
So I think you're seeing more and more that games are being developed just for esports because more competitive games, so like Riot, for example, just announced a slew of games. They're famous for League of Legends, which is absolutely huge. It's the biggest esport in the world. But now they're coming out with an FPS, a fighting game. What else did they have?
Yeah, they're coming out with a card game. Basically the plan that we all see that Riot Games is the direction they're wanting to take is they want to be able to have a game in every genre of the market of esports. And to kind of help answer what your question was, I think that unlike traditional sports, esports is very unique in the fact that, like you mentioned about baseball, that's a static sport that's not going anywhere, and that's been around for however long. But the beauty of esports is that these games are meant to be played for however long, and then if the market or the industry feels like this game is no longer kind of fulfilling their needs, then the developer goes back and says, okay, we now need to make a better game. We need to make a more competitive game, a more fun, interactive game in order to keep this going and keep people wanting to both play and watch.
That's one of the interesting things that I find about esports. It's like when you talk about baseball, that's the game, it's not going to change. When you talk about esports, it's whatever game is currently the thing that people are zeroing in on, whether it's Fortnite, whether it's something else. And that's constantly evolving, like you're saying. So the yesterday's star, who was great at one particular game, maybe it's the next one's a fighting game that person kind of isn't very good at. Well, that's it. We're moving on to this next generation of players for a given thing. How do you keep up with that from a production point of view, from a programming point of view? How do you keep up with that constant evolution of esports as it goes from game to game, from style to style of the different games?
So it helps that because of just the great interest in all of these games, you do have a lot of crossover for these players where maybe they won't be able to switch from a first-person shooter to a fighting game or something like that.
Right.
But you'll see a lot of, right now, a lot of Halo players are playing a game called Apex Legends. So you do have a lot of this repeat talent that you'll be constantly seeing. And you'll also have, like Julius, for example, he casts just about every game under the sun. He's done everything, and we love him for that. And it's you just have to be flexible. It definitely can be a little hard to keep up with at times, even as a spectator, because you'll see roster changes, people swapping games all the time. But it's definitely something that you can get a handle on whenever you're very involved with it.
And I think, too, as well, something about esports that is really cool is that there are solidified genres, if you will, of esports. And so for that reason, a lot of these professionals may switch titles, but they stay typically in the same genre. Kind of like what Forrest said, FPS players will stay in that genre.
And the
MOBAs
genres aren't going away.
Exactly, yeah, they're solidified.
So what do you have set up at NAB? I noticed we shot earlier, we kind of walked by you guys. You have a big booth set up. It looks like you're streaming something, but we couldn't quite tell what you have going on. Tell me about your setup at NAB this year.
So we're partnered with NAB to bring esports to the show. Okay. And this is a small installation compared to what we have in the Las Vegas show. But basically, we are just showcasing what a small production would look like for esports. We only have 2 stations up there, which is pretty simple. We're running it off of a TriCaster, an audio board, a little light setup.
Right.
And so it's to showcase what gear we're using. We have partnerships with the equipment companies that we're using as well to kind of show people what works in esports and what doesn't.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think too, more so on the production side too of what we're doing here at NAB is that we're also kind of putting inside the minds of everyone, especially these industry professionals who may have not experienced esports for themselves,
right,
to be able to experience a little taste of it and really kind of pick their brain and their interest on what exactly is going on here. What am I watching, right? And so I've already had several people come up to me and really ask me like, what is this? What are these video games playing? And really getting people kind of to pique their interest about the genre and everything. And I think that's something that we both, and especially everyone at Activate, are very passionate about and really love doing, because we really care about ensuring that this kind of particular thing like esports is accessible to anyone. It doesn't really matter young or old, who you are, anyone can really enjoy a show that we put on, and so that's what we really pride ourselves on.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for coming by.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Yeah.
Activate and talking about esports. This is Brian Stillman bringing you continuing coverage at NAB 2019 here in New York with BeTerrific, BeTerrific.com. Stick around, we've got much more coverage coming your way. And check out BeTerrific.tech, where you can check out the Agility Quadricep. It's our new display panel. It's the first product developed by BeTerrific. They're very proud of it. It's flexible, it's lightweight, it's cost effective. It's a great way to get your product, to get your imagery out there. Stick around, we have a lot more coming your way. We'll be back soon.